Hey, hello everyone. Hi Venkatesh.
Hi, Jagdish. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. I'm great. Welcome to Clarity Chat with a cup of
Thank you
tea.
very much. Look forward.
Yeah. So, um, hi everyone, our audience. We are on Clarity Chat today with Venkatesh Natarajan. He's a veteran at Ashok Leyland, where he has been a CIO since 2010 and at Ashok Leyland since 2000, so almost 21 years now. And he's currently the Chief Digital Officer. Um, he has some connotations to CDO, which he will explain himself. Um, he has successfully transitioned IT at Ashley from business optimization, as it used to be earlier, to now front and center of business, and so much so that the CEO talks about Ashok Leyland being digital. So he spent first 15 years in business, manufacturing, maintenance, EDP, and then went on to sell vehicles before joining Ashok Leyland in IT. He has driven SAP implementation, mobility, connected vehicles, and digital marketplace at Ashok Leyland. He believes in leveraging experts, co-opting business leaders in transformation, and continuously trying new technologies. So, he's okay. I mean, what I find really good about Venkatesh is that, he's okay to let certain things fail, and he has got a phrase for it that not every train stops at Chennai Central. Some
Mm.
stop at Ocean Bridge. So people who are in Mumbai, not every train stops at CST, at VT. Some trains stop at Dadar. So he has some compelling growth stories and case studies. He loves to teach and share, and is a guest speaker at management colleges. By the way, how many of you know that he's a district level table tennis player and he still beats his colleagues half his age at table tennis? So here is the something common between us. I was at Tata Motors, he was at Ashok Leyland, and we were competing. And I think I was studying what Venkatesh is doing. He was studying what I am doing. And sometimes at conferences we would validate these things with each other. We would also check what we are doing. And I think this was like a good case of while the organizations are competing, we still make friends, and it's good to actually benchmark with your competition, isn't it? Okay. So welcome Venkatesh to this edition of Clarity Chat. At this point, I used to give elaborate introduction of the purpose of Clarity Chat. I got some feedback that we don't have to repeat it every time, so no longer. We'll keep this for the end. So where before, just after I and VN say byes to all of you, we will play that video. So let's begin. Venkatesh, welcome once again, where we have the CXOs, founders, IT managers, and technology folks in our audience. Now, all have a common agenda, learning the art of finding success with technologies.
Mm.
And this is from the experience of leaders like you and me.
Yeah.
Um, you came from manufacturing, went to sales, and then came to IT. So
Yeah.
please share some of your growth stories with us. Especially what are some of those inflection points, and some of those experiences which kind of had a lasting effect on you and led to your success.
Thanks, Jagdish, for that wonderful introduction. I think, if I'll have to start off with my schooling days because I still feel that what you go through in the school, those formative years, really shapes the personality of a person, and it's got a major kind of an influence. So the my formative years was in a place called. And by the way, Jagdish, I'm actually a Tamilian, but I was born, brought up in Karnataka in Bangalore for a long, long time. So I only speak Tamil, but I can read Kannada, I can write Kannada, right? I can speak Kannada, of course, right? So a large part my schooling was in a place called Kolar Goldfields, right? And that's where my father was working in a public sector there, and we were living in a township. And those days, I think that those were that was in the 70s, I would say, 70 to 80, I would say. And still, I feel, Jagdish, those days were very innocent days. I think, there were not too many variables in life. So life was very, very simple, I thought. So in those days, life was like a simple equation. Today, it has become a differential equation. So there are too many variables in life today. But I think, so we had only to go to school and then come back. Since it was in a township, there was a club and you had all sorts of games there. The only job, the only thing, purpose in life for us was to go and then study and then come back and then play. So I had the opportunity of playing a lot of games, indoor, outdoor, from billiards to badminton to table tennis, of course. And table tennis was my primary kind of a main game, and I kind of quite excelled in it, I would say. As you say, I was just once upon a time a district champion and so. But I think that experience of living in a township in a very very close group, participating in a lot of sports, makes you a person, kind of a rounded person, where while you play to win, but I think you also start accepting failures also, right? And that collaboration, what people talk of today in the organization today in corporates, of saying that you will have to handhold, you talk of partnerships, internal partnerships and external partnerships being very very key today for corporate success. I think the seeds of all these are sown, I think, for me at least, during those school days where we were playing a lot of games, hand holding with a lot of my friends, many of them still I keep in touch. So that's the 10 years of my quick kind of schooling. And those were the formative years, which has significantly influenced the way I look at things and my perspective. This, the second was, and of course, I should also narrate, an example where I was 11 years old and I was playing a table tennis tournament, one of those many tournaments I used to play. And I went on to beat the district champion those days. And I was just 11, right? And there was so much of appreciation and so on. People lifted me and so on. And that was the first time kind of beating a champion. So you never know, right? You're an underdog when you started, and you went on to beat the champion himself. And then came on 1980, got into the engineering days, right? And engineering, of course, those days the number of seats were all very, very limited. And my father wanted me to be an electronics, I mean, my mechanical engineer. I wanted to be an electronics engineer. The reason is electronics and communication was one of those branches which was just kind of in a very nascent stage. You had were not all colleges offering electronics and communication those days. But my dad somehow felt that mechanical engineering is like a broad gauge. You do mechanical engineering and you can branch off to several kind of areas once post your engineering. Went on to do engineering, and I lived in the hostel. So I think that's very critical. I think for people, for them to have a short stint or whatever stint, living in the hostel becomes very important, because in the corporate, when you talk of managing others, I think the first thing in my view is you need to manage yourself first. And managing yourself, I think you start learning the threads of that when you really live independently in a kind of a hostel. So you have a mix of fun and study, and fairly I was a fairly good student also. And one of the things is to have that circle of friends. So when I say manage yourself, you become independent physically, emotionally, and maybe monetarily or commercially. You still have to, you are depending on your parent, but at least various other things, you start taking care of yourself. So that's the art of, the before you really start managing others, you have to learn the art of managing yourself, which I really picked up, I think, during the engineering days. And I also felt that it's very important that you have a very circle of friends, a good circle of friends with people who aspire to do, to grow in their life and career. And I would say I had some very good friends, but they were not too ambitious, I thought, right? So nobody was really at that point in time talking of whether we should do a GRE and a TOEFL, and then, you take off to the US and do your MS in the Stanford University or whatever it is. There was no talk of that kind. And I still feel that probably that if that kind of an environment was there, I would have probably at that point in time, I would have taken off. And then by this time, I would have been the governor of California, I guess. In the lighter vein, but of course, I don't regret, of course, at this point.
Or maybe the CIO at Ford or GM.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. So, so that's the engineering days. And then, after that, you kind of 84, 85, and then you get into your first employment. And those days, Jagdish, appearing for those entrant tests of NTPC and NHPC and these kind of companies, they were all kind of crowning glory. And that is the ultimate aim for any engineer who really passed out. So wrote a lot of these exams and then got into BML, public sector, right? And those they I started off as on a shop floor, right? And then they rotated me on various kind of jobs. It was maintenance, and then I was in the systems department. It was no, it was not called the IT department then, and then manufacturing and marketing, and ultimately now the question is, does it really add value when you start, when you in an organization you work in multiple functions or multiple verticals? I guess if I look back now, that has really added quite a lot of value because you get an oversight of the overall business rather than being very, very confined to a particular area. While at the same time, you need to kind of strike a balance, I feel, that between being a generalist and being a specialist, right? If you kind of keep changing too much, then there's a famous saying which says, Rolling Stone gathers no moss. So I think it's important where you have to strike a balance between being a generalist and being a specialist, at least up to the age of 40, I guess. Then later, of course, when you start growing up your corporate ladder, you kind of get into general administration and so on. So it was a very, since I was rotated, I was in the manufacturing, I was in the foundry thing, so dirting my kind of hands. And ultimately in 92, 95, I was in Mumbai. 93, 95, I was in Mumbai, in the regional office sales then, right? And I worked with a boss who was very demanding, I would say. And that was also in a very, I take it in the right spirit. And the earliest I used to leave the office was 10 o'clock in the night or 10:30. And our office was very close to the Churchgate station. So I used to walk up and then take a train and then reach home at about 11 o'clock. And this became a daily affair. And he was so demanding that he never used to give us even time for us to really plan a itinerary in terms of tours because I was in sales then, right? So I had to take off on demand to Pune, Nasik, Jalgaon, Kolhapur, and so on. And those days you never had any online booking and so on. So many times I used to land up in the station there, waiting for the Indrani Express in the morning in Dadar to go to Pune with no reservations. Right? Those were the days. But I think if I look back, those were the days where I really got hardened. It was a very tight schedule, right? Job-wise, expectation-wise. So I would say it really hardened me. And hardening is not a case hardening, right? To be very technically putting it, it was a kind of a total heat treatment. So the body itself got completely hardened, I would say. And that was a good exposure. That was 95, 10 years. And then next 5 years, again, ambitious. You're in your mid-30s. You start wondering, hey, what is it that I'm doing here, man? Should I not... So I think this thing of I always keep talking, Jagdish, is this comfort zone. If you get too comfortable in one particular role, in one particular place, in one particular job or whatever it is, right? I think it is important that somewhere you will have to do an introspection and then see whether are you getting into too much into a comfort zone for too long a time. And that's where you will have to really think over and then say, how do I really come out of this comfort zone? So I think this kind of hit me in 95. And then I said, no, I need to now experiment, right? And then I got out and went overseas. So I was in the Gulf for 5 years and in the Gulf. And let me tell you, again, my experience here is the easiest thing in terms of change is when you change within the department or function itself, you're given a new role. That's the easiest to adjust. The next is from one function or department to another function within your own organization. And then changing your job within the country itself is the next level of difficulty. And the most difficult thing is when you really kind of go overseas for the first time, your job is new, your role is new, your environment is new, right? You're in a foreign country. For that to get used to, and you have to get used to this, what is called this Gulf syndrome, I would say. So people going from here, they expect, people to have Gulf experience. When you come back here, people will expect, your experience in India. But anyway, whatever it is, 5 years. Life was good, materialistic, right? I had everything in life. But I felt I was not in the comfort, kind of, it was getting too comfy, I would say, at that point in time. Because professionally, I was not really happy with the thing. If I really started matching, what I'd really studied and what I was capable of doing to what I was doing there, there was something which was telling me that I think probably you need to look at something else, because there I was in the sales of Mahindra and Bajaj. Wonderful products, excellent products in India. But again, when you kind of pitch it in the other geography, the perception of product and brand changes based on the geography, right? So it was not very kind of easy to be selling those products, excellent products, but still perception really changes. But that was again an eye opener for me, right? Quite a lot of international exposure in terms of how customers view really products and brand overseas is something which I kind of learned. So I realized that again I was in the comfort zone, came back, and then in 2000 was the time I joined Ashok Leyland. So this is my quick 20 years, should I say, for 30 years, from 70 till 2000, of what I really went through. Jagdish, I'll pause at this point in time for you to be,
Yeah, yeah. No, I think this is a this is a great summary, and let me kind of you know let me share with the audience my insights. So to begin with a little bit of humor and a tickle. We and you have been Bangalore Tambi, okay. you know one of my advice to to powers that be would be that please include Venkatesh in all the Kaveri talks. He will be able to balance between the Bangalore of his youth and the Chennai of his present. Anyway,
absolutely.
that's just to just on the lighter side. Yeah, but I think very important, managing yourself, being in a hostel. I can recall, when my daughter joined her college, she got it in Bangalore, and I was just shifting to GE in Bangalore. And my advice to her was that if your college has a hostel, please go there and be there. Be away from us for a while. But that's important for your development. And it's also an advice to a lot of people who are like they're so protective of their kids that they want their kids to like be in a college which is in the same city, or if they have got a job in a different city, they'll try to find some contacts that can this guy get a job in the branch in this city. I guess some of them are not good for growth of children. And hearing it from you, your realization that it's good for your own growth, we can't say more about that. Very important thing about having a good circle of friends. I think that's absolutely important. There's a saying that you are the company you keep. So very important. And if you're going to be aspiring for somebody, find other people who are aspiring for the same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And I can kind of connect it to your being ambitious, and that ambition is like something that kept you pulling out of the comfort zone. I really like those uh, the layers of the comfort zone, or the degrees of comfort zone. Sometimes we do a little bit of changes here and there, and we think that okay, I'm getting out of my comfort zone. But yeah, you should look at the degree of your degree of discomfort that you are creating, and that's very important. The other thing, for all our audience is, finding that balance between being a generalist and a specialist. I think if I look at your story, the first about 15, 20 years being, just being a free radical, looking around, trying to find your own niche, but being very true to yourself in terms of what I'm enjoying, what I'm not enjoying. Many a times, this comfort zone gets us that feeling. We try to rationalize the state that we are in as to why it is good for us. I think it's good to be true to yourself. Am I enjoying it or not? And and then like trying to find where is your calling. I think something similar happened to me. Um, I was in customer service, and I got into headquarters, and then I got this opportunity to transform Tata Motors sales and marketing through CRM, and a little bit of transformations before, and then I kind of sort of got my calling, that which is like I can play around with technology to transform any process around in the organization. And then it was more like, okay, let's be there. Could have had a career in customer service as well. And I think uh, the final thing would be, to understand that don't compare yourself with people with whatever you see around you. Like, you go to Dubai and then you try to sell the Indian brands there. I mean, you realize that global competition, and today, I think all competition is global. Whether it's competition for products, I mean, all the global manufacturers are here, and I find that even the competition for talent is global today. Uh, when you're trying to hire somebody, in your team, I think the same person is probably being hired for a offshore development center of General Motors or Ford or or General Electric, like when they hired me. Okay, so I think some really good takeaways, and yeah. So let's start a little bit after that. So tell us about your journey in Ashok Leyland IT, and
Yeah.
you have seen this whole journey from IT, which is automation and what you call as business optimization, and then transitioning it after the whole SMAC thing came, um, seeing the entire transition towards digital. So tell us about like some case studies from that first part, okay, and then moving to the second part, and what remained common and what became different.
Jagdish, I think okay. The next thing is maybe my stint in Ashok Leyland, and it's been about 20 plus years, as you said, 20. This is my 22nd year in Ashok Leyland, and it's been a wonderful kind of a journey all along for me. So let me cover the first 10 years of this journey. Joined in 2000, as I said, after the Gulf stint, I came back and then joined Ashok Leyland. And when I joined, I realized that I was actually recruited, hired in a fairly senior level. I never knew that when I was there before joining. So after I joined, I realized I was the 36, 37 years when I joined, right? And I joined at the level of the so-called, even today that designation is there, it's called divisional manager. And then I realized that there were not too many people in the organization at that level, at that in that age. So I was a kind of a kid of the block, I would say, right? Quite young joining there, and there were a lot of people commenting that, hey, you have a guy who was joined who's just 36, 37, who has joined at this level. Fortunately, yes, that was a good opening for me, and I got into those days. It was called the MIS kind of the department, and that was a time where we Ashok Leyland was actually looking at opening up. Right, we were at one kind of an inflection point where you had a lot of decentralized systems. You had the e-commerce boom happening, a lot of decentralized, isolated kind of systems, and then 2000 was the time when you started really looking at how do you connect all these systems and get everything onto a central platform and so on. So I had a lot of work to do when I joined. Very, very interesting, I would say, where we went in for developing our own kind of custom built solutions. Whether we did the right thing at this point in time or not is debatable, but I think we went in for developing our own custom built ERP. And I kind of like a mother's recipe, I kind of handcrafted quite a lot of these applications. It could be the marketing solutions, it could be the plant maintenance system. From the level, Jagdish, you will not believe, I have gone down to the level of designing tables, designing the UI screens in terms of how the field layout, screen layout should be, right? Designing reports and so on, right? Quite kind of dirtied all my hands. Brought in quite a lot of my COBOL experience also onto this when I joined. And more importantly, I think I had a very good boss who was a friend, philosopher, mentor, guru at that point in time. He was the head of IT, right? His name was Mr. Monakrishnan. Unfortunately, he's no more, but he was my mentor. He gave me more than anything else, I think, the freedom to work, the freedom to make mistakes, the freedom not to kind of feel kind of subdued or get scared of doing something. That kind of a culture was built by him, and I still treasure that quite a lot. Again, I would say those formative years in a new kind of an organization when I was establishing myself. And then in the year 2002, right, again, I was getting into this comfort zone. The comfort, you're in the corporate office in Chennai. That was in Chennai. My initial posting was in Chennai. And then I was told to go to Hosur. And the reason was, it's like the sales guys, you say, hey, sales guys should not be working in the corporate office or in the marketing HQ, right? They have to get a kind of an exposure in the field. You have to dirty your hands, right? So they said, guy, VN, you have to go get dirty your hands. So go to the manufacturing unit. So I was deputed to Hosur and then made responsible for managing the IT, heading the IT for. And by the way, we have got three manufacturing facilities and units in Hosur. Then and even now, we have got three manufacturing facilities, and that was like one of the nerve centers of IT at that point in time. Right today, a lot of things have got centralized. So I was kind of heading that. A lot of responsibility at that point in time. So because you are the department head, right? You can't pass the buck on. You are called for all the reviews, and that's a time when we were implementing a lot of all these homegrown kind of ERPs and so on. So you're responsible. So that I think was a stint where we kind of dabbled with a lot of new things. We did like some new MI systems. I tried out the mobile for the first time there, right? Very very early, I would say. You had no smartphones at that point in time, but still dabbled. Again, 2005. Again, I was saying, hey, am I getting too much into a comfort zone? Because personally, life is fine for me because I was working in Hosur and I had my family and we were living in Bangalore. So every day I used to travel from Bangalore to Hosur, and of course, you never had the nice road. I was staying in the Mysore road, and we never had those roads. And Electronic City was always a nightmare. And Electronic City to Silk Board used to take 1 hour always. So net I used to spend in the evenings at least 2.5 hours for me to reach my house from Hosur. I did not mind that. But again, I started questioning myself: am I getting into a comfort zone? Yeah, job is good, responsibility is good. You're staying with your family and your parents there in Bangalore. I could have as well continued. Then, but I said, I think I raised the red flag, and then I told my boss again, my mentor. I said, boss, I think again I'm getting into a comfort zone, but I want to be part of the action, and the action is always happens in the corporate office from a leadership perspective. So this was more of an exposure for me to the organization trying to groom me as a leader. So I came back to Chennai in 2005, came out of the comfort zone again, came back to the nerve center because the nerve center of IT still remains to be Chennai for us, being our headquarters here. So I came back to Chennai, continued to do handle additional responsibilities. I never shied away from taking responsibility. In fact, I was asking, why don't you attach this to me? Why don't you attach this to me? Right. In one way, sometimes you say you should be a Napoleon Bonaparte or Alexander the Great. When he's conquering territories, you will have to start expanding your portfolio if you really have to grow in your organization, and you should be ever willing to take up new responsibilities. And there's no harm in asking also for new responsibilities depending on the organizational priorities, and that's precisely what I really did. 2009 2010 was the time we took the decision to migrate to the SAP platform. And at that point in time, I was identified as the project director, and they said, you're supposed to be leading this implementation. Jagdish, this is a turning point for me. And it was a massive kind of a team. We had outsourced guys, we had our in-house core team members of about 60 people, all put together about 150 people strong team I had, right? Implementation partners, system integrators, and so on. And I was so attached, and my team was so attached to that homegrown solution because we had handcrafted. As I said, it was almost like a mother's recipe. Then you start kind of getting that you are so attached, you're not getting emotionally kind of involved in this, in driving the new thing, right? I somewhere felt I was also, and one of my friend came and one of my manager, he was literally in tears. He said, sir, VN sir, we have done so much. We have to dump all these things and then get onto this new platform. How do we do this, right? At that point in time, I said, guy, we will have to move forward. We will have to pluck that attachment from your heart, and then I kept it in the coffin, ready to be buried. I realized that if I don't pull that out as an attachment, right, of what you were doing earlier, right, you are not going to do justice to the role what the organization is giving you in terms of implementing SAP successfully in the organization. So that was something of a kind of a change. And then I said, moving forward, it's going to be only SAP. I started believing very positive that this is the way forward. And believe me, for an organization which has got used to these homegrown solutions and so on, which is so kind of tailor made to your requirement, a lot of comfort zone, right? All users are very, very comfortable. To get them onto a very, very regimented platform like SAP was no easy task, right? And so 2009 and 2010 was the time where my boss was also retiring. And I really never thought very seriously of becoming a number one, but yes, I had this ambition, of course. And then in the month of 2010, April, I got a call from my MD's office, my CEO's office. And he said, boss wants to see you. So he gave me a time. I went on the 24th of April. I went to his office, and he said, "We have identified you after the CIO who's leaving on superannuation. We have identified you to take on the mantle of heading the IT function." And he gave me some reasons also. He said, "You're fairly well qualified." I think more importantly, what he said, and that still sticks to me. He said, "I think it's very important. We have found that you were quite acceptable, and that's very important. You need to be acceptable. Acceptable does not necessarily in the organization does not necessarily mean that it is a weakness, right? You shake your head, right? But I think acceptability is listening to people, having an open. You don't bite people, especially the IT guys have got this habit, when people approach them for some solution, we guys have got this habit of pushing these guys off. Guys, you don't know, guys. This will not work. Don't come to me for a solution, right? So I think these are softer aspects which one has to get kind of used to. And then suddenly when this thing was thrown, and then I took over on the first of May 2010, I took over as a CIO. And believe me, what a change it was. And I can tell you, Jagdish, I was always number two. There's a huge difference between being a number one and a number two. Whether you're moving from a very senior cabinet minister to the prime minister's role, right? Or you are moving from a very senior person to becoming the managing director or the CEO of the organization. Or like in my case, you are the number two, you are now heading this function, right? This is a huge kind of a change which you will have to get used to the extent where it took me about 4 to 6 months for me to get used to that role. The reason is, again, when you look above, you can't again pass the buck. Everything stops at you. You have to manage vendors. You have so many people, especially in IT, very, very knowledgeable people, right? Well-groomed people who come and then talk, and then you learn the art of negotiation, bargaining, right? At the same time, ensuring that you treat all your vendors and partners respectfully, right? You don't push them to a corner, because you need to build partnerships. And that's really where I really started working on building partnerships with your various vendors and partners. And that becomes very, very critical, right? And then we went on to the implementation. We rolled out in manufacturing, right? And then in the sales and marketing. And you can imagine, very large organization. We have got so much of complexity, so many outlets. Sales and marketing, again, so many outlets we had to roll out, right? We took this decision on in the month of September, first week. I went to my boss and said, "Boss, let's go live. I think we are ready." And I believe in I call this as critical mass of readiness, especially when it comes to software implementations, right? You can't expect 100% kind of readiness, right? You have to judge. I think that's where the leader comes, judgment becomes very important. You have to judge whether it is okay. Now you can pull the trigger and then you can take off. It is like a pilot who's kind of taxiing on the runway. He reaches that so many knots or whatever it is. At that point in time, yes, that's a speed. He pulls that lever and then it is off, right? Your lift forces come into action in the aircraft really thing, and all your engines are on full power when during takeoff till you reach cruising altitude where you can afford to switch off an engine. Similarly, I think we had all the engines ready, and I told my boss, one day or the other, you will have to bite the bullet. Someday or the other, you will have to bite the bullet. He said September, half yearly closing, and you know how important it is for Indian companies. It's not only manufacturing, but even other Indian sectors.
Absolutely.
Right? 30th of September becomes so crucial. Would you want to do it now? Because people know that there will be a lot of disruption. I said, let's do it. He went ahead with it. He went ahead with my suggestion. And then we went live for on the 8th of September or so. And in 3 days, on the 11th, there was a hue and cry amongst the sales and marketing guys, entire sales and marketing guys. There was a loud kind of a hue and cry on saying, the system is not working. We will have to move back. We will have to roll back to the old system. I said, no way. No way. We have taken a step forward and we will move a step forward. And that's where again I sought leadership support. The head of sales and marketing, he visited the SAP implementation center. I mean, that's where we had 150 plus people sitting in another office here. And he came and then went back and he spoke to the people, right? And people, we were all down in the sense, there were a lot of health issues. People were not sleeping because of issues. People could not sleep properly. Despite all the kind of support we were giving, people were falling sick. Quite a lot of people fell sick because they were having to work continuously without proper sleep and so on. He went back and then sent a wonderful mail to all the regional managers, right? And of course, to the entire leadership team. He said, Guy, I have visited the SAP implementation center, and I find that the implementation is going through like a breeze. Compared to the kind of horror stories I've heard earlier of these implementations, our case is actually a cakewalk. Guys, pull up your socks, get going. There's no way of going back, right? We need to just move forward. And believe me, that month end, 30th of September, that month was the month where we did the highest sales. And I have a mail again from the head of sales and marketing saying, well done, kudos. This is probably a record where an organization has done the maximum sales in the first month of a major implementation, right? When I say a major implementation, because these kind of implementation, I say SAP implementation or any major system implementation, it's like a newborn baby. When a newborn baby comes out, Jagdish, the first thing it has to do is it has to cry. If it does not cry, there is a problem, right? But you can allow it to cry, because and then allow it to die, right? So you need to have an army of people to support and those critical time when you go live, right? You can't be really looking into too much of processes and procedures at that point in time. You just need to have people to douse the fire, and that's precisely what we did. The rest is history. Today we have a very, very kind of a matured platform now, right? So managed change. So I think it's very important. The takeaway here is the management, and I mean, people know, but this is something which I want to reiterate, that leadership support, management support is very critical in these kind of change management. So I say, if you don't get support in change management, you have to change the management, right? So change management, change the management. So that is very critical. Management support and thing is very critical in driving change. And I mean, so today when I look back, right, the metric which I kept for myself was to say, guys, today everybody, when we new system, everybody will be cursing the new system, saying that I don't have this, I don't have this. I said my job of implementation is over. When I go back to these users and then say, hey guys, tomorrow again I'm going to now change the system. We're moving away from SAP. We're going to get into some other system. And they say, no way, you are not touching the system now, right? They become so comfortable with it. That's the day when I considered my job as over. My implementation is over. That is business as usual. And then it continues. So those were the first 10 years of kind of driving change, being groomed as a leader in the organization when you kind of took over, and all those kind of very uneasy thing, initially for you to get into that role. And it takes some time. As I said, there's a huge difference between number one and number two.
Yeah, so I think let me again kind of just summarize it a little bit. So you are fortunate to get an empowering boss, and I'm sure you are one. I have seen that people who get good mentors generally become good mentors, and I think it's very important for everybody listening out here that if you have a boss who sucks, go find another boss. Okay, find a mentor. So your boss has to be your mentor as well. Very important, thing from your mentor to come to you that please go and dirty your hands. And I think unless you go to the places where rubber hits the road, you are not really going to understand what kind of difference you are making. So I remember doing this quite a few times that I would visit these plants at least once a year. And, it's like CIO coming, so you can orchestrate an entire visit, and I would be like, no, I want to see this place. I I would kind of pick all the transaction heavy units, like for example, that material gate, where your SAP is really getting tested in terms of how much of trucks it can, pull in per hour, right? In terms of whether all your automations and everything is working or not. And just to look at the number of trucks at your material gate tells you how your SAP performance. And so these were like various pointers I had that okay, I want to go and check, and that will tell you a lot, whether the network is working fine or not, right? Whether the equipment are working fine or not. So once I found that um, the queue is long, and when I go inside, half of the barcode scanners are broken, the printers are not working, and and you can imagine what happened to my people and the business people there. I'm like, why is there no ticket for all this? Okay, so yeah, good to.
Just add to that, I always keep saying that today technology guys have to be really sales guys, especially to drive digital and all that. You need to be sales guys, and the second is you need to be like doctors. Doctors, in the sense, the things are getting very complex, and sometimes something happens, your connectivity goes, something happens to your configuration, application is not working. But I think that like a doctor who always keeps giving hope to the patient, we have to always keep giving hope to the users, to say that there's nothing wrong, no problem, we are going to get the application up and running, right? Don't worry, right? Don't kind of panic and then make the users also panic. So you need to be a doctor there. You need to be a sales guy to be marketing your whatever you have done. And unfortunately, technology guys are still kind of techies. They're kind of coming out of that, but still.
Yeah, no, but I think that's very important, and I was just coming to that, the sales head coming and just sending a mail to everyone that guys, it's a cakewalk. I think the best thing it does to everybody is to just uplift the overall sentiment, and that's as important as doing the right things, is also to manage the emotions in the organization. I think you're very right. We need to be the sales guys to not just be bogged down by the technical difficulties, but also to lift up the sentiments. So coming to that, Ian, the other part that I wanted to ask you was so how has been the transition towards digital, and what are the new things that you had to learn and to do as you set up the digital marketplace, or when you were setting up the connected vehicle program? How did you have to look at the new technologies? So you said very important thing that you had to really overcome that phase when you had hand built a system, and leave your mother's affection aside and do what's right for the organization. Now when you move towards digital, okay, in terms of setting up these things, what are some of the new things you had to do, and what are some of the things you had to forget?
I think so. Take me on from say 2010 to 2010, 11, 12 was a time where the world really started talking about digital, right? I still remember there was the first time I heard of all this SMAC technologies. When you say digital, it was SMAC technology.
Just a minute, Vian. Before you go forward, I just want to appeal to all the audience that guys, whoever is out there, please start asking questions. We will soon move towards question answers. Please ask your questions to Vian on the comments, and we'll take them up one by one. Please go ahead, Vian.
So that is the time I still remember. There was a conference. I think it was an IBM conference in Kathmandu, which I attended, and that was the first time where I heard the SMAC technologies of social mobility analytics and the cloud. And luckily, we were quite nimble-footed, I would say, as an organization, and we kind of quickly embraced those solutions. Initially, looking at digital for business optimization, and then we kind of took it forward and then said, how do we take digital to the next level for generating revenues, new business models, and all that. 4 years later, 2016, right? So if you ask me, what are the two things which are still remaining today? Nothing has changed from the time. I think the first thing is the demand for IT services has not changed. It is only increasing now, right? Even then, there was a lot of demand for IT services within the organization. And there was always pressure. The IT guys used to always be working under pressure. And even today, I say that guys, as long as, and you should feel good about it, I would say. You should feel good about it because there is a demand for your skills and competence and for your services. In a world where jobs are vanishing rapidly, right? There are new skills which are coming up, and the skills what you have seems to be kind of getting outdated very, very quickly. It will be very heartening for people to accept that yes, the skills what I have got is not only contemporary, but it is also futuristic. So what has not changed? The demand for IT services has not changed. It is only kind of improving. And then it's only increasing, I would say. The next is the need for robust internal processes. I think, even earlier we were emphasizing that we should be having some very solid, structured, well-defined processes, whether you call it as an SDLC process or whatever. Today, the same thing is very critical, right? We could have got into the digital era, and today we talk of agility, we talk of MVP. But having said that, what the importance for robust processes cannot be overemphasized. It is very critical today. Probably as part of the SDLC, we also talk of DevOps and DevSecOps and so on. It is all talking of processes. So I think that is very critical. So as an organization becomes more and more entrepreneurial, right, we should not lose sight of having some very robust processes, more from even from a compliance perspective also. I think so that is not really changed. And of course, that general saying, we were used to say, people used to say, garbage in, garbage out. That also remains the same even today, with data being considered as an asset. The quality of data, and especially when you're getting into an AI driven kind of economy and world, the quality of data is still kind of very, very critical today. So these are the things which have not changed, and it will continue. Those are all kind of cast in stone, I would say. These will not really change. But what has really changed is the way you look at your organization. Jagdish, 4 years back, I suddenly found that I asked this question again. Do I have the right organization, skills, competence, more importantly, the mindset, right? Do I have people with the right kind of mindset, and more importantly, the passion for technology to drive technology? That's a question which I asked myself. And I said, probably not. So 2016, it's almost 5 years now, 4 to 5 years. I envisaged forming this separate organization for digital. And that is a point when Gartner used to talk of bimodal IT or dual mode IT, right? So you have two modes of IT. One is your traditional IT, SAP, CRMs, and so on. That's very, very core. That is a digital core today. And then an organization for driving this. So this is like something like, I give this example of Japan National Railways. So they have got a conventional track. So you have the normal trains which are running at a normal speed, whatever it is. The normal speed is much faster than our Shatabdis and Rajdanis here, but still. And then they have a bullet train track, your Shinkansen track, right? Your Nozumis which run on that. That is a completely different track. It has got a different track. It has got different rolling stock. It has got different signaling systems. It has got different stations. It has got different crew, right? Everything is different. But everything rolls into the Japan National Railways in terms of the organization structure. So I kind of created this digital organization, and when I created and identified the person to head this also, initially, of course, and very, very natural it is, they had this kind of sense of insecurity in terms of how this whole thing would pan out. But I said, this is the way forward, guys. Please look into the future always, right? This is the way forward. And it was accepted. And today, this team is playing the major role. When you say digital transformation, this is the team which is driving the transformation in the organization. So what is different? I said, you need to have digital warriors. As I said, the sales guys, right? Guys who are fighting the battle in the battlefield. The digital warriors have to go collaborate with the business to find out problems. You need more problem finders today than problem solvers. You need data hunters today, and that is the role the majority of this digital team would be doing. You need to be playing the role of an anthropologist today. An anthropologist who goes, he's a guy who studies tribes and lifestyles and so on, right? So you need anthropologists today in the IT organization to be doing, whether you call it as an empathetic design, right? That's what is design thinking and so on. To conduct some ethnographic study, you put yourself in the user's shoe. You live the life of that customer or the user when you design solutions. That is the skill which we try to develop as part of this digital. So that has significantly changed. And you become marketeers today. You need to be marketing. You need to stand up and then talk and then sell your ware. It's not just developing a piece of code and then leaving it. You will have to drive the adoption today. And this team does that. And I said, your job is not just to develop something. Your job is to go sell it. Your job is to go sell it and then ensure that the benefits which we have been envisaged as part of ROI is indeed derived by the organization. That is like a salesman. Salesman job does not end by just selling the vehicle. He has to ensure he has to get the money back. Correct? No, credited to the account for that sale what he has done. Right? Your job closes there, and then to build that relationship with the customer. All that is part of the digital, and that has changed significantly. So the digital organization today is significantly changed. That is from a people perspective. From a technology perspective, I think the way we look at cloud today, cloud typically, which was at a 30,000 feet level, right? And you were talking of security on the cloud. People always had doubts. I think today, cloud has become an accepted computing model today. The first thing I look at is, can I put migrate things to the cloud? And that I think drives innovation because you're able to quickly do it. Whether it is very cost effective, that's a matter of debate. And we can keep debating. It's not, it's a kind of a double-edged sword, I would say. You have to be careful when you're working on the cloud. So that's a drastic change from the way we were looking at things. Even when the cloud started off, I think about 7-8 years back, there was a reluctance on moving to the cloud. But today, I think it has become the de facto default kind of a computing mode. And that has significantly changed from a technology perspective. And thirdly, the way you look at cybersecurity has also changed significantly today, right? Especially the last 1.5 years or so. The number of attacks and the number of organizations which have been impacted by the cyber threats and the cyber risks have significantly gone up. So the way we look at cybersecurity has also significantly changed. But to get that in the organization, there's a lot of effort amongst the team itself to say, when you develop a piece of code, you will have to embed security as part of that code, go through the proper testing process, and so on. So ultimately, I would say my role has changed now, right? I was a CIO, and now today I talk about Dashavatar of a CIO, which I've spoken earlier also. Today, the expectation from the organization is that you're expected to play different avatars. You're not only a CIO, you are a CDO, Chief Digital Officer, you are a Chief Transformation Officer, you're a Chief Innovation Officer, you're a Chief Integration Officer, you're a Chief Process Officer, because you're supposed to be driving processes in the organization, process automation and so on and so forth, right? The moment you talk of process, then data, so you become the Chief Data Officer. The moment you talk of data, then security comes. You're also the Chief Information Security Officer. And you're the Chief Integration Officer because you will have to look at integrating all these things. I don't know whether I've got the 10, but in a kind of a PPT, I've got all the 10 kind of roles of a Dashavatar. And the 11th role, I would say, is today the CIO is also the Chief Harassed Officer today. Because as I said, the demand on technology, digital has gone so much kind of exponentially gone up. You're the Chief Harassed Officer, and it is up to the individual to take it whether you're really harassed or you enjoy that, right? You're really enjoying that kind of, you're kind of in the limelight, right? Enjoy that limelight. But if you look at it from the other way, negative thing, you can get bogged down by that kind of a pressure. But today, there's a new role which I've kind of identified, which I said is the chief. I'm a CDO today, but no longer the Chief Digital Officer, but I'm the Chief Differentiation Officer today. The reason is, off late, I find my management, my leadership, are driving me for leveraging technology for differentiation. They're constantly being saying, how can we now develop solutions, as if you believe that manufacturing industry and automotive industry will slowly move from being product centric to more and more services and solution centric, right? And you're seeing that happening, and you know that very well, Jagdish, in the automotive industry, when you talk of case and the industry slowly, especially in the bus segment, moving from owning the asset to going on an EMAS business model. Those are all green shoots just now, but those are going to become major business models moving forward, and technology is going to be the major driver there. And where you have to really differentiate yourself, because your hardware is going to become very commoditized. That differentiation layer, which is going to be driven by data, solutions, services, right? Software. Today, when you talk of software-defined network, software-defined storage, software-defined compute, and so on, tomorrow, and even today, it is already today, it is a software defined vehicle moving forward. Are you geared up for this kind of a future? So, and how are you driving that differentiation layer? If you have to differentiate from your competition, your data solution, that layer becomes very, very critical. And that's where I'm saying we become the chief differentiation officer, right? And ultimately, I would say, I don't know whether the role of IT and the CIO would be there in the next 3 to 5 years. Yes, the CIO role will be there because more and more of technology is getting embedded as part of the business itself today. We are seeing this happening. So your role could be more from a chief information officer to a chief integration officer to kind of integrate the various, kind of pieces in this whole kind of a puzzle. I think that's the way things would pan out in the future, I guess. So I'll stop at this point.
Oh,
Thank you.
that was awesome. That was such a passionate, you know, I would say, exposition which can only come from somebody who has really practiced it, lived it, day in and day out. But I mean, just playing it back, the purpose. I mean, what I gathered from from what you said, I think the purpose remains the same. Whether it is whether it is the strength of the processes or um, you know or you know
I was saying the
this
demand for IT services
yeah
is also, yeah.
yeah, the demand for IT services there, being the problem solver. I mean, so those fundamental purposes remain the same, but I think the skills what are needed are different. You need problem solvers, you need marketers, you need people who are like right, who can play on front foot. IT typically plays on the back foot also because of the number of demands and the number of backlog that it carries. But and the whole adoption of cloud. I mean, I remember the first time that I sort of looked at cloud, and I said, "Listen, guys. I mean, forget the cost. It just gives you the kind of speed, which cannot be matched by your traditional process of like defining your entire BOM, and then going through a procurement process, and then going through a 6 week cycle of procurement and installation." And especially if you have to really do too many experiments out there, when are you going to run this process? Why not just do it on the cloud and then figure out where you really want to do? And I think a good example of that would be something in telematics, where the amount of data is and the number of technologies that you need to implement to really get that experience out. It just very near impossible without adopting cloud. So
Absolutely.
we have some questions coming here, Ian. So hey Vijay, good to see you are attending Clarity Chat where you were a speaker once, where you were a guest once. So his question, I think you can read it, Ian.
Yeah, yeah. So Vijay, hi Vijay, and long time. How are you doing? So Vijay says, I've seen that quite often pushback against adopting newer cutting edge technologies comes from the IT team. Is there any way to address this while not splitting the team in two? Vijay, I think in our organization, I've not really faced this kind of a scenario where there is a resistance, right? While I say that there are two kind of tracks, right? One is the traditional IT and the other is a digital track. I think it's very important from a leader perspective that you view this as equally important, right? When I say that innovation is the life, is the blood and the lifeline of the digital team, that does not necessarily mean that innovation does not apply to the traditional IT. No, it applies to them also, and whatever they do is also kind of and there is innovation also happening on that thing also, whether you're moving from an SAP HANA platform into an S4 HANA platform, which is a kind of a newer technology, whether you're implementing any of the supply chain solution platforms. So there's a lot of things which are happening there also in terms of technology change. So I think it's very important that the team also recognizes, and they recognize that there's a lot of things changing, and their role is also very important because they are the ones who really create this digital core. If you don't have a robust kind of a core or a foundation or a very very robust bedrock. It is like a bedrock of the entire digital solutions platforms. If you do not have that, then you cannot have a very very robust front end. If you have to deliver this unique kind of a customer experience to your customers, very very exponential improvement in UX and so on, I think it's very important that the traditional IT, they play a very very critical role. And so far I've not really had a thing where you find a resistance in terms of adopting new technologies. I think it's a way. It all depends on how you look at it, and it also depends on how you kind of drive that transformation, because the internal transformation is also very important. And this is where I take this example of Sadhguru. Sadhguru talks of inner engineering, Jagdish. That is, you can't control the outside, but there is certainly something which you can control within yourself. And this is where I tell my team also, this inner engineering is applicable even to the organization and to the every function also. You look at how are you operating first. You don't have much of a control on the external environment, right? In terms of making your processes robust and so on. I think this whole process of inner engineering, we call it, right, also helps you to kind of manage change, accept change, embrace change, look at embracing new technologies and so on. So that is something which we drive in the organization. One of those is inner engineering. And thanks to Sadhguru for that concept.
Yeah. So maybe like let me add my bit to it. I think the core principle of change management, and Vijay, we talked about it in our clarity chat, is like Maaru Su, what is in it for me? So I think as long as we are able to answer that question for everyone in the organization. So I remember the first thing what I did when I was strengthening the team around in 2009-10 was to hire actually infrastructure team. We didn't have a solid team there. And then, the first thing when we started doing this digital transformation was, these guys getting insecure that, oh, we are moving to the cloud. So, why did you hire a data center manager, right? And then, I think the first thing is sometimes we start transformation that we put somebody new and then we ask him to transform. I think no, it should be an opportunity for your team also to upgrade themselves. So I told everyone that, guys, everybody has a participation in this. So, we conducted some training programs which were specific to people. Like, for example, we trained our infrastructure guys on the cloud, right? We trained, our networking guys on, whatever new kind of stuff was coming in. Like, for example, Saturday afternoon I'm sleepy. It is like this what do you call setting up your private networks, IPVPN, right? So those kind of things, and everybody really found a play that something I can contribute here, and that's what really makes it a movement. If you just put one person and that one person is driving, it might not make it. So coming back, to questions, we have lots of them. So there's a question from Giridhar. He's asking, any traces of increase in revenue due to digitization in manufacturing sector, rather auto sector? So, and what do you see there?
Yeah, I think in terms of now today, you talk a lot of this word called monetization has really gained a lot of traction, Jagdish, in the last 1 year or so. Right? We were really not talking often. Recently, I think in one of those SAP summits or whatever, I spoke on the fine art of data monetization. Right. So you talk of how do you monetize data, and so when you talk of this, when you talk of monetizing whatever investments you have made on IT, right? It could be a core platforms, it could be digital platforms and solutions, right? How are you seeing an increase in the revenue? I think it is from a manufacturing industry perspective, the intention is that, right? And when you look at monetization, there are two parts to it. One is your indirect monetization, and the other is your direct monetization. And I mean, that's a full-fledged kind of half-an-hour presentation I kind of done. But when you talk of direct monetization in terms of your subscription for your platforms or whatever you want, but that could be very, very small at this point in time, right? But as this industry moves into more and more of solutions where people don't own assets. They would want to have, these paper use kind of a model, right? That's where I think your whole platform, you could look at that in terms of how do you kind of monitor. Even today we have got quite a few of these solutions which we provide as part of a connected vehicle solution, which we generate revenue. For example, we have a data as a service. We provide raw data, sometimes massage data from a connected vehicles to some of our customers. And take, for example, somebody who's carrying, say, Hyundai cars. He's a transporter, and Hyundai is, they have a need for tracking those vehicles. So we provide relevant data through APIs to them. We monetize that, right? But at this point in time, does it make, is it big money are you making? And no, not at this point in time. So that will also call for a change in the business model, which will happen. It will take some time, about 5 years or so. This whole thing is going to change. But I truly believe that revenue from solutions is the way forward. And you should be prepared mentally, organization should be prepared mentally to be looking at not making money from these monolithic kind of sources of revenue, like selling products or whatever it is. Moving, it could be solutions. And these solutions could be, you would earn micro revenues from microservices. And that some portion of that would be fairly sizable. But at this point in time, it is not very, very kind of sizable at this point in time. But moving forward, yes, I think that's a way forward.
So, I mean, just my 2 cents on that, just to add to what you said, Venkatesh. Conceptually, if you look at it, I think there was a time when, there was no need for actually after-sales service to earn money. Tata Motors and Leyland were duopolies, and, the vehicles always commanded a premium, so dealers could make all their money from sales. Then we moved towards, when more and more competition came in, that is when, services and, capturing that aftermarket value, selling AMCs, refurbished vehicles, trade-in programs, all of these things became important. So aftermarket became a source of revenue and differentiation. And I think it's a specific nature of market for maybe Leyland as well as Tata Motors, where I was, where there's a repeat buying. So the customer loyalty is very important in terms of securing your future revenues. And I think moving from sales to aftermarket into now data-driven solutions like telematics or these digital marketplaces and all, I think this gives you that kind of lock-in on the customer where the exit barrier for the customer is much more beyond just that discount. It is like that there's a certain way of life you have got him used to in terms of how you are helping him improve his business with data. And I think for me, more than sources of revenue, it is the customer loyalty that you are able to secure, especially in the commercial vehicle business. Do you agree with that, Venkatesh?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And what you really see is the demography of these commercial vehicle customers are also changing. You do have a lot of millennials who are coming. So what was once upon considered as a differentiator for you, that very thing is changing now. What we were thinking of KMPL as a differentiator, and the gradability as a differentiator, turnaround time as a differentiator. Today, customers seem to be asking, do you offer a kind of paper as you go kind of a model? Can you help me with your digital solutions to maintain my fleet better, right? Can you kind of get into more and more of remote diagnosis and repairs? This is the kind of conversation and the change and the flavor in the conversation which we are seeing. So customers largely are also driving a lot of these transformations in the organization, I would say.
And I see this like the second generation effect. So a lot of these businesses, traditional businesses, are now being taken over by the next generation, which is all like educated, in good foreign universities, and they come back and they see that, that how far behind we are from the economies that they have seen and experienced, right? So anyway, so many other questions. So let's move forward. So Miraj Vashi is asking, can you please share the top 5 suggestions on selling the solution, driving the change in a top-down manner, especially when there may be a cultural resistance of adopting new ways of working? Now, this is again from an organization point of view.
But especially a data-driven organization, you say, I think, Miraj, a very valid question, I thought. In fact, last year we launched this initiative called a data-driven organization, right? Which basically centered around saying, hey, how do you make this organization use more and more of data, right? The moment you say data as an asset, because even IP has got IPs are considered as an asset and it gets into your balance sheet now on the asset side. The day is not far off where even when you say data as an asset, and especially with these data protection laws and all that coming up, right? It's only a matter of time before data is also considered inventorized, right? And then it appears on the asset side. So to that extent, how do you protect this asset? How do you use this effectively? Is the question which organizations have to address. So as part of that, we had a set of action points. In fact, Miraj, if you really share your email ID, I can probably kind of give you some more insights on what probably we have done in terms of a set of actions where, more importantly, I launched what is called a digital leadership program. Because one of the things we observe is how do you get the senior leadership onboarded to your digital journey? And as a CIO, if you believe that you're always a couple of years ahead in terms of your thinking, technology, and so on, it's very important that you are like an engine and you will have to drive the bogies, correct? You can't be detached and then you zip off, right? You have 21 compartments which need to be pulled. That includes your senior level management, your middle management, and so on, right? So how much of power you have in your locomotive engine, right? You'll have to pull. So we launched what is called this digital leadership program. Basically, the first thing is to create more and more of awareness. Every opportunity we get, we kind of present something to this leadership team, right? On various things. For example, I'm saying day after tomorrow, not day after tomorrow. Yeah, today is Saturday. Yeah, day after tomorrow, Monday. Monday, 5 o'clock, I have a presentation on what we have done on RPA, right? So introducing that concept of RPA. Last month we had a digital leadership program. We introduced, on our AI platform, which we call it as Hubble.ai and so on. The power of AI in terms of predictions, in terms of recommendations, in terms of computer vision technology, video analytics, and so on. So, and use cases, more importantly, what others have done. It's very important you bring in that outside in view to your organization and then say, what is it that you have planned and what is it that we have done? So that is a consistent kind of a thing which we do. And then, have these sessions for these senior leadership so that you actually they begin to kind of appreciate, the power. They all understand the power of technology, but they may not know the nuances of that. For example, all of a sudden you say RPA, right? Well, what is RPA, right? So kind of you spend some time on kind of demystifying a lot of these things. That's one of the action points, apart from several other things which we have done in terms of creating and pushing, driving more and more of data literacy in the organization to make the organization more, to build this so-called, as Gartner calls it, as digital dexterity in the organization.
Yeah. No, all the great points. I have also seen some of my fellow CIOs, running these digital, programs or digital transformation programs for business leaders. Okay, and these are like handpicked leaders who have got some potential for driving technology programs from a business point of view, from a business transformation point of view, and you basically train them on these concepts. I think Miraj, the only thing I would like to add here is that I've seen that with senior leaders, these things are many times not best discussed in a committee format. Like you're making a presentation to them, they would just listen to you because see, in a committee format, nobody wants to look as dumb. Okay, so many a times it is better to discuss in a one-on-one format with them, more in terms of educating them what it is, as Vian said, bringing an outside-in point of view and answering a lot of their questions which they will not ask you in a forum, in a committee or in a in a management forum. And then giving them and feeding them some more information which will basically make them understand, appreciate, as well as talk confidently in front of others. I think that's a bit of digital empowerment that we need to give to the senior leaders. It's somewhat bit of reverse mentoring that we have talked about earlier. So we have lots of questions. I'm also aware of time as well as your time, Vian. I know it's a Saturday. So a quick one on throwing some light on digitalization in design and engineering function. Maybe a 1-minute response.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. A quick one. You would want me to answer this in a minute. I will just answer this.
Sure.
Mr. Minanath, I think it's a nice question because I always say in an automotive industry, there's so much of we only talk of the ERPs and the CRMs and the digital platforms and so on. And if you consider that as the Pacific Ocean in terms of the size, in an automotive industry, your engineering IT and what's happening in your design centers and so on, right? Your product development center. In an automotive thing, your CAD platforms, your PLM platforms, your testing, simulation platforms, and so on. That is also a huge kind of an IT landscape, I would say. And that is equivalent to an Atlantic Ocean. Atlantic Ocean is smaller than the Pacific Ocean, but not very small. That's also fairly big compared to the Pacific Ocean, right?
Absolutely.
So I think in terms of maturity, I think you the front end, your business application, and that your Pacific Ocean is a little more kind of an advanced, but there's a lot of scope to do in terms of digitalization and more of bringing in AI into this design and engineering area, right? And also driving analytics and so on. So you have a lot of new concepts like generative designs and so on, right? In this thing. But I think there's a lot of catching up to do in this area, which I said is Atlantic Ocean. People don't look at that. And you have the third layer, which I always say, which is beyond this, which is your industrial IoT layer. Especially old organizations like us, we suddenly find that there's so much of data. Your torque wrenches are also now smart devices with IoT sensors and so on. So there is a discovery process which you will have to do, and that is the Antarctic Ocean. Antarctic Ocean is the least explored. So you will have to do a solid kind of a ocean mapping to identify which of those equipments and machines and tools which are generating data, which are consuming data. That's a huge kind of a discovery process which we will have to do. But yes,
No,
the
absolutely.
digitalization is very critical. I think in the
Absolutely, absolutely. I really love this analogy of oceans. The most traveled oceans, the lesser known oceans and completely unexplored oceans. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in manufacturing in the IoT function, definitely. Yeah, there's a comment from Shankar, fully agree with me, and IT cannot only be limited to technology. We need to sell our solution to and see if the organization derives value from it. Hey, that's great to know that you're taking your
Shankar.
approach at Ashirwad. And then there's a comment from Giridhar, and thanks Giridhar for asking that question. And now we have Mrinal. Thanks Mrinal for joining in, acting on your intent that you've been expressing to me for some time. He's asking any guideline for CIOs how to handle and align with CFO who's holding the cash and thus much more controlled situation than a CIO who's mostly seen as a cost center. Great question for you.
Difficult question, Mrinal.
Very deep question and very, very coming from the heart.
Rightly said. I think in terms of the impact of technology and digitalization is equally there on the finance function also, right? And I think very progressive CFOs, like in my organization, they kind of look at technology in a very, very progressive way in terms of he's always the one who keeps asking, what is it, BN, what is it that we can do to further kind of take the finance transformation to the next level, right? And whether the CFO looks at us as a cost center, which I don't know, over the years I've been driving home this point, Mrinal, that the real transformation is when the organization starts looking at IT not as a cost center, but as a value center, kind of a function which kind of delivers value. And I think that's pretty much, I think we probably could be there, not the end destination, I guess. So the perception of IT as just consuming cash or whatever, I think that's there, but I think that perception is slowly getting eroded, I guess, as technology is getting more and more embedded. And businesses find, and CFOs really find that you really can't thrive without technology. So that's my answer at this point in time, which is top of my head kind of an answer. I can do a kind of an in-depth kind of a introspection or thinking, and then give a more detailed answer, I guess, later.
Yeah, I'll just add my bit to it, Mrinal. Um, I think I narrated it in one of the other clarity chats. My boss used to be a CFO, and he was once told that how much money he sort of saved, investment bankers when we took a loan and all, and that amount was like a good sum that investment bankers made, and I only made a comment to him that if you could give me even 10% of that money, uh, my a lot of my pressures would be relieved. And so I think many a times it is to compare what you are asking for with respect to what some of the other big spend areas are. I always used to compare the IT cost with a lot of other costs. Like, for example, if you look at warranty cost in an automotive organization, it tends to be very high. I mean, maybe 10 times that of the IT cost. And I would say, boss, why don't you ask me to reduce your warranty cost and give me some money? So, we have to use it as a lever. The second thing is, I always created a value scorecard, which I used to show to my CFO in terms of what kind of business value we have delivered. I think it's always a good idea to capture the business value of IT and put it into a scorecard, get an agreement with your key business stakeholders. It doesn't matter whether business did the hard work or the IT did the hard work, but because of technology, we were able to do something. So
No,
these are
just to
some of
add, every month we send out what is called a monthly value register. I forgot. For all the functions, at the end of the month, what is it that we have done? And then try to put some numbers out there. We call that as a monthly value register.
yeah, that's a
Just to
that's
show.
a that's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, it's something similar to what I used to maintain, and I used to show my boss in between. So yeah, so Miraj, and then maybe another question coming from Vijay. When an IT vendor approaches you for a meeting, what makes you agree to the meeting? Why will you agree to meet?
Oh yeah, very question which is close to my thing. I'm very clear. Today, if you really look at the kind of mails what you can get a lot of mails from a lot of vendors I receive. Right, I get a lot of cold calls also. How do you react to this? And that's where I think you need to get your priorities right. If there is something of there is a need for you, there is a requirement for you, yes, you identify, and then you definitely, I encourage that vendor to come and present, or first send a mail and then come and then present, or whatever it is. But there could be a lot of these things. If I start responding to every mail, if I start responding to every call, then I'm doing an injustice to my organization in terms of my time, and my time is precious. So if I have to now devote my time for all these things which will not add really value to the organization, then it is better that I kind of have a mechanism by which I am able to manage that, right? So it is all driven by is something which an vendor offering, which is it relevant to us? Does it add value to us, right? Is it affordable? Because there are certain things which are exotic. We may not be able to afford that. Is it affordable to us? So there are a set of filter criteria which you kind of subconsciously apply, and then get into the next level in terms if it's a new vendor to talk to him or whatever it is. So there's a lot of judgment which we kind of do, right? And I'd say there is no rule book for me at this point in time. These are all, it comes out of your experience or whatever it is. So, but I think there's another thing is we try to talk to vendors, even sometimes when there are some very niche offerings which are there. It's important that you understand what is happening. When you talk to the vendor, he gives you a new perspective, right? And it's important you talk to him. But you apply your judgment there in terms of to whom will you talk, whom will you encourage. That's a judgment we'll have to make.
Yeah. And I think, so once I was called to take a training program for IT salespeople, just to kind of, share the CIO priorities or mindset, what makes you talk, similar questions. And I think my response to them was that the first thing is like, do you understand me? Have you done enough study, or have you done enough research or understanding of what the current pressures are, what's going on in the organization? How much do you know about the organization? If you haven't done your homework, you probably won't be able to create that connect, when you send that mail or whatever, right? So let's move on. Felix, great question. I have no answer. I'm sorry. You got to probably drop a mail to the powers that be in Tata Motors And thanks, Devinder. Sandeep, thanks for your comments. I think we have run out of questions here. Now, before we close, I'm just taking some insights which I gathered. It's some sort of a informal summary. Get out of your comfort zone. Get closer to the nerve center if you want to make a big difference. Um, when VN was working in his role in IT, he never knew that being acceptable would get him the CIO role. Okay, so it's very important to be acceptable. In fact, something I heard was uh, it's okay to have disagreements, but don't be disagreeable. Okay.
Good one.
When you work in an organization, we must maintain the courtesies and be acceptable. Um, must focus on robust processes. Chief process officer, CIO being the chief process officer is something which I completely agree with BN, and I and Vijay had a long chat on that. Another very important thing that I picked up from BN, and he spoke about it a few times. Like for example, when you're engaging with senior leaders, or when you're trying to create an agenda, bring in an outside-in view. That's very important. We discuss about the yin yang of digital. What changes and what remains the same. The core agenda and purpose of why organizations use technology doesn't change. But what is changing is the kind of skills that you bring in, the kind of new set of processes that you have to adopt. Cyber security, cloud. It's all new learnings, but the core purpose of having tighter processes and adding value to the business, that doesn't change. Another one very important was the ocean mapping. Figure out which are the oceans in your organization, map them, and only after that start taking some actions. And I think the last one, in terms of creating an engagement with your CXOs, especially your CFO,
Yeah.
start maintaining a value register.
Correct.
So a great session, Ian. I'm we are almost 27 minutes, beyond our time. Now, before we end, I would, so I promise to people that, we will play a small video of what is the purpose of ClarITea. So anybody who has watched it already can log off. But, for anybody who's wondering what's the purpose of ClarITea, why do we have it every Saturday at 5 p.m.? You can watch it. So here is to my team. So what's the purpose of the ClarITea? Our friend Vijay Ramachandran has been researching this subject for 25 years now, and very starkly, it's only 17% of technology projects that achieve the intended business benefits. Now, why does this happen? This happens because IT is more complex than what we think it is. Most functions are at a crossroad of industry and function. Finance for manufacturing, finance for BFSI, HR for manufacturing, HR for BFSI. But we got to know technology for supporting all the functions, right from your HR, finance, manufacturing, maintenance, everything. Anything that you do with technology has a people impact. And that means that you may implement a technology, but will people use it? That's the first dimension. The second dimension is that management of IT is a nascent function. Most of the functions are more than 100 years old. IT is just about 30-year-old management function. Digital transformation, that's just about a 10-year-old function. What that means is that there is not sufficient amount of management science around IT and digital. And whatever is there, it is not fully disseminated. Now, the nature of the industry is that it's a high margin industry. For anything that you want to do, there are a plethora of options. And therefore, there's an intense amount of sales and marketing as well. When you combine that with the asymmetry of talent, you kind of get a clearer picture. 95% plus of technology talent is on the supply side, either with product vendors or with system integrators. And the very small minority is on the enterprise side. When you combine it with intense marketing and sales efforts, you kind of understand why it gets more confusing to select the right technology for yourself. Now, these factors come together: multi-dimensional complexity, two added dimensions of IT looking after entire enterprise processes, as well as the people impact of technology, IT being just a 30-year-old function, digital being less than a 10-year-old function, very competitive, very high margin industry, and very small minority of talent on the enterprise side. All of these converge together to give you the answer to the equation, 17%. That's where Clarity Chat comes in. The science of managing IT is not that well disseminated. Therefore, it's still an art. And how do you learn the art? From accomplished artists, which is the CIOs and business leaders. These are informal discussions over a cup of tea, and that's Clarity Chat for you. Okay, thank you everyone for joining in, and bye VN. Great session. Thank you so much.
Wonderful experience, and thanks to your team for putting.
Thank you everyone.
And thanks to the audience, a wonderful audience.
Absolutely wonderful audience, very engaged. Thank you everyone. Bye bye. See you next Saturday 5 p.m.